The Helix is an absolutely amazing unit, and I've owned the Helix, the LT, and the Stomp for the last 8 years. And in this video, I want to teach you everything you need to know to get started with this unit. And although I think the Helix is a really intuitive unit, I still think it's super helpful to start with a high-level overview and then dive more into the specifics. So with all that said, if you want more Helix content, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive in. All right, everybody, so I've got my Helix here, and in this case, it does not matter if you are using the Flagship Helix or the LT. Everything I'm going to show you today will relate to both units. The only difference is if you own the Flagship Helix, you will notice scribble strips right up top here and a different expression pedal. Other than that, the actual software is going to be the exact same. Now, the first thing I want to call out is if we click up here with this different preset mode, this is what's going to go in and allow us to access all of our different set lists that are stored within this specific Helix. Now, if you've done a factory reset or you purchased your unit used or new, you're going to be able to go in and quickly and easily see the different amps that have been saved here from line 6. Now, some of these are honestly pretty good. So if you want a place to start, you're completely new to the line 6 ecosystem, these are a decent place to go. Over here on the left under factory 2, this is where we are going to see presets built around more popular songs. And then down here under user 1 through 5, this is where I personally store all of my aftermarket presets that I've purchased. Now, if we tab back over here, let's just pull up our US double norm. This is going to be like a Fender style amp. And then from here, when we go and we look in the top left, if I hit save, of course, this is what's going to allow me to save any adjustments we make to this specific preset. If I want to rename it or change its destination, I can do so here. You can either hit cancel, or if you ever get lost, you're like, I don't know what the heck to do, hit the home button here, and it will take you back to that preset. Hey everybody, Editing Zach here. I forgot to say, I am giving away this guitar in the month of March. So check out that giveaway link down in the description, and let's dive back into the video. The top right with the 3 little lines is going to be some of our global settings. We'll come back to this later. Again, we have our home button down here, and this is actually going to alternate between 2 different views. In this case, this view is our signal chain view, and this is where I typically go in and do most of my editing. But when I'm playing live, I typically like to use the Stomp view because it's easier for me to see which effects I've actually engaged. Now, you'll notice here where I have my optical trem selected, if I hit this little amp button, it actually takes me directly to my amp to make any adjustments that I need for this amp's preset. Now in the top right, we have our bypass, and this is what's going to engage or disengage that effect. Over here, we've got our action, which will allow us to easily move that effect. There's also going to be a lot of different options down here, and I won't dive into all of the specifics in this video, but one helpful tool here is you'll notice there's this little line, and there's not one over here. That means I can page left and right. So in this case, anytime you see that, for instance, if I move over to my reverb, you'll notice there's a line there, there's not here. It means I can page over to see other parameters to edit for this specific effect. Now, if we actually click on this little knob right here, this is what's going to allow us to see a bank of all of the effects within our unit. So if I tab over here and use this little twist knob, we can go in and we have a favorites, which if you've saved favorites on your Helix, you can access those here. I'll talk about that shortly. And then we've got all of the different effects, and I can scroll through till I find what I want. If I want mono or stereo, and then go in and we can see that Hot Springs is selected. Just click this button here. If we want to switch back to our other view, we simply hit that home tab. Now, if I want to go in and make adjustments to this specific reverb, or if I want to go over and make adjustments to this trem, you'll notice that this is highlighted over here, and then I can quickly and easily just select these different options here to make adjustments. Now, one thing that's really cool with the Helix is, let's say I make an adjustment, but I want to take it back to whatever the default was for this specific system. I just click down and it takes it back to whatever the assigned default was within our Helix. Now, if I ever want to change my user default, let's say I go in and I find an effect like this Hot Springs reverb that I just love. I've dialed it where I wanted. Click on action. And then over here, you can either add to your favorites or you can set up a user default. And what this will do is next time you recall that effect, it will have all of your pre-saved parameters ready to go. Now from here, let's go ahead hit our home view, and we will see our stomp mode. Now from here, again, this is typically what I like to use when I'm playing live because I think it's a lot easier to see what I'm actually selecting. In this case, if I click on red squeeze, it's going to engage that compressor. If I hold down A, we'll see here where I can go through and I can either adjust the latching type, or if I want it to be a momentary switch, I can. If I wanted to swap my trem and my squeeze pedal, if I just touch A and B, I could swap those two pedals around. Now there is one other mode in here. If we select both the up and down bank, this is where we are going to have our snapshot. Now I'm actually going to make an entirely different video talking through snapshots because really it's one of those things that you will either use or you will probably never use. In this case, snapshots allow you to go in and have spillover between different effects. So theoretically, I could have like a verse tone and a chorus tone and carry that spill over for those different snapshots. I'll show you a quick example here. Now I've got a different preset here. If I select the bank up and down at the same time, you'll notice there's an ambient harmonized drive, there's different drive modes, and these are going to be different snapshots where I could go in and theoretically go from a clean tone to a huge amp lead tone. This will allow me to switch between multiple parameters and effects with one touch. Again, I'll make another video about this because you can get really in depth with snapshots pretty quickly. All right, now I'm going to be back in my Fender style preset, and in this case, in the bottom right, we have our tap tempo, which if I hold down, is going to give me my tuner. And honestly, this is kind of a silly thing, but Helix has a really great tuner. If I go in and I tap this, it is going to control the timing of all of my time-based effects. Over here on the right, we have our expression 1 and 2. And in this case, if we go back to our home view and we scroll all the way over here, we see our volume pedal. If I pull this down, we can see that this is tied to the volume pedal. If I go over and I push this down, theoretically, let's say we're playing live, now this is going to be tied to our wah. And this can be either used for a wah pedal, it can be used for a pitch, and it can be used for a volume pedal or tying it to other expression settings as well. Now, one other cool trick up the Helix sleeve is if you hold down this mode button, this is going to pull up all of your individual effects blocks for this preset and give you the ability to go in and actually edit this with your feet. So theoretically, let's say you are playing live and you want to go in and you want to adjust how much compression is hitting your signal chain. If we click on red squeeze, you'll notice here that we've got our sensitivity, our mix, and our level, and it's assigned to these 3 different foot switches here. So let's say I want to add more mix, and I click on that right here, and then I can go in and using C and D, I can increase that value of my compressor. If I want to go back, simply hit the tap tempo, and it's going to take us back to the signal chain view for this specific preset. Again, holding down that mode button, if I click on, let's say, hot springs here, I'm going to see all of the different parameters, and if I want to page over, we've got B and A right here, and I can see the left and right page. Now, quite frankly, I have never used this live because I typically dial everything in right where I want. But it also can be kind of nice too if you are in a studio and you don't really feel like bending down to make adjustments, you can do it with your feet. All right, so we've gotten to the point where we should probably talk about how we go in and maybe change some of the different mappings for this foot switch. Now, let's say we want to go in and change our tremolo here. We can do so, and we've got it mapped to B. But let's say I want to map it to C, or I want to move it up top to here. How would I do that? Well, if we actually click on those 3 little lines, this is where we're going to see some different global settings, bypass, assign. And in this case, we can see our harmonic tremolo is assigned to foot switch number 9. And if I go in and I move this, you can see quickly here where foot switch 3 is going to be top row of B. And let's just say I don't want it to be latching. I want it to be a momentary switch. This is where I can choose to engage that here. Now, one really cool thing as well is if you have a MIDI pedal, you can just click on this button, tap your MIDI controller, and it will learn that specific foot switch that you've chosen to map it to. Now, if we go back here quickly, we hit our 3 little lines again. The control assign is where we can go in and we can click. And if we want to map a specific parameter to one of these, this is where we can also do that. So theoretically, if we wanted to map something for like our expression pedal here, this is where we could go in and do that. Once again, hitting our 3 tabs. Command Center is going to be everything you need to do to go in and map your MIDI controller. The global EQ is something that I would probably recommend you go in and just have to set to your liking once, and then you no longer need to adjust that. Once again, this is where I can tab over, and there are 3 different pages for me to look at in relation to global EQ. Now finally, we have our global settings, and this is probably going to be one of the more important places to go in and look and just make sure you get everything dialed in the way you want it to be. In this case, we have all of our ins and outs, so we can either go in and control if there is a pad on the front end of our guitar, what type of output we want for either a line, a microphone, instrument, the USB destination, and there's a lot of other settings as we move along here. If we want to go over to preferences, this is where we can just simply tab over using this control knob here. For preferences, recall snapshots is going to allow us to either discard when we move from one snapshot to another or recall any adjustments we have made. The tap tempo pitch, moving from transparent to authentic. This is kind of funny, but if you are changing your time-based effects in real time while you're playing and you tap it in, you're going to hear this really weird whoop as it adjusts to the actual tempo for what you've tapped in. If you don't want that, you can switch that here. There is a ton more, and again, go through here and get acquainted with some of these. And if you'd like a more in-depth video about maybe what some of this means, let me know in the comments below. Now, for the foot switches, you'll notice here where it says touch. This allows me to go in, and if I want to disengage my ability to just hold down and edit a stomp, if I pull this up here, notice how I can go in and make adjustments. That's where I can go in and turn that off if we no longer want the ability to touch those stomps. We can go in and also choose if we have 8 presets or our presets per individual stomp, so on and so forth. Over here on the right, this is where we can adjust our expression. And then the display here allows us to go in and control whether we want to show the dim lights here. So see how there's the light yellow, and then when I pull that back, it is off. I personally like having it on, and we can also choose to remove the tap tempo if that bothers you. Now, with all of that said, check out this video right here on adjusting snapshots for your Helix.